The rest of the guys then, what was your favorite quarterback to fit landing spot?
It's interesting because I think in a way they've all landed in quite good places. Actually, there's no pressure for any of them to start. I'm really intrigued by the Sam Howell situation. I do think he flies a little bit under the radar for me. I just appreciated what he did in terms of his ability, and I know he's not Michael Vick and he's not Dan Marino, but I think he does have a quality that I admire, and I think he's mature enough to come in if Carson Wentz starts to, if we look like the Carson Wentz at the back end of what we saw in the tumultuous last few weeks at Indianapolis. I mean, I suppose the Desmond Ridder situation we talked about just a minute ago, again, very interesting. I mean, the sort of dearth of receivers, dearth of sort of skill position talent would mean that you'd almost want to let Marcus Mariota go to the Wolves, as it were.
Take the bullets for you.
Yeah, but in a way, Ridder is so mature, both intellectually, physically, in terms of his off-field stuff, in terms of his leadership, that actually it probably isn't going to be a massive issue for Ridder. I think the gap for him coming in to the gap to him starting is actually probably smaller than everybody else, just because of just what he has mentally. And I think, I mean, the one I feel sorry for is Bailey Zappi in terms of, the Patriots are really, I mean, the Patriots draft was all over the place, but when are you ever going to play? I just don't understand. Unless they're
in San Francisco next year for a second round pick.
Exactly. But I just kind of feel like, when are you ever going to? And again, Malik Willis, absolutely no pressure to start first year, can come in and learn. Whether that's learning alongside Ryan Tannehill or with Ryan Tannehill or in the darkness with Ryan Tannehill remains to be seen, given Tannehill's comments yesterday. But again, no pressure to start yet necessarily. Allows Treylon Burks to bed in a little bit in terms of get his feet under the table for a year, and if the Titans want to move on from Tannehill in a year's time, they can do without it ruining their financial situation in terms of the cap. And in comes Malik Willis, and he's got a year under his belt. So I think all of them landed in situations where there's no immediate pressure. I thought it was interesting that a team like Detroit didn't take a quarterback. They stuck with what they've got, for better or for worse. But yeah, I think I'm intrigued by the Sam Howell situation, because I do think that there's some upside there.
I think Howell's the one that jumps out to me of like, that would not be shocking if in week 4 they just pulled the plug on Wentz. And I know they gave up the picks and all that, but the Howell thing is purely about, is this the 2020 player or is it the 2021 player? If he's 2020, he goes in the first round. He probably goes in that Pittsburgh spot. And then how does he go from what is probably the most gimmick-based offense in the Power 5, maybe Ole Miss, maybe that one, basically the same offense at this point. How does that go up to professional concepts, and how much has he done after he left North Carolina to be advanced enough to walk into the training facility on day one and just get it very quickly? And I think if he is a guy who will just get it at some point, similar to Baker Mayfield, came from that funky Oklahoma offense, came into an NFL building of like, oh, he picked up way quicker than we expected he would do, then I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be more accurate than Carson Wentz. And the only concern with that Washington offense is that's not a very big offense. Carson Wentz is not an accurate thrower of the ball, and so he's going to get himself into trouble. So that's one where if you're trying to place bets now on who starts, well, Pickett probably starts first, who starts second. I think Howell is the smart money, and to get him in the 5th round as well is extraordinary value.
I mean, what I like about Howell, and you talk about 2020 to 2021, I think limited in 2021 by the graduation of those top 5 weapons. When
every single player he's met,
Diami Brown, Michael Carter, Javonte Williams, they were all gone. And what he did, he didn't set the world alight per se, but actually he was better, more efficient, and had a better passer rating in 2021 without all those weapons than he was with them, which I thought was kudos and credit to him for his, for just getting it done without the weapons that he had. And I do think that if you can work into him, get him moving out the pocket a little bit like Arthur Smith did with Ryan Tannehill, get him throwing on the move, all those sorts of things, the ability to utilize. Remember when Ryan Tannehill came back from the trade and he had that really good first season where they just rolled him out all the time, run pass options in terms of being out in open space, and he could either use his legs to run or to throw on the move, which he was very good at. Howell is so good with his legs. I think he had the most for 65 missed tackles in 2021, the most ever by a Power 5 quarterback in a season. Can pick up significant chunks of yardage. He's big. You obviously don't want him taking hits all the time, but he just has that ability to just do those things, make significant yards with his legs. He's a gamer. I like watching him
Yep.
play, and I think he'll be a really intriguing pick for Washington.
And the deep shots, because it's like, Carson Wentz, when he steps into a ball, he looks like a Hall of Famer. That's always the tantalizing thing with Carson Wentz, but Sam Howell throws a deep ball better than him more
Yeah, he does.
consistently. And I know they haven't got a ton of track stars there at Washington, but if you've got Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin, both who pepper the intermediate level, right? That's where they're at their best. Well, if you start getting double moves off that, or you can spring one because you stack them together and people don't know who to cover the most because they're scared of both Dotson and McLaurin most likely, and one springs open down the field. I mean, it will just be bombs away.
And you've got Diami Brown is there as well. You've
Mhm.
got his old college receiver. And actually, you look at it, you got Diami Brown, you got Jahan Dotson. They picked up Jaquiz Ezard from Sam Houston State, who I think is a really good undrafted free agent to play in the slot. Obviously, McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, obviously coming off the injury. I think there's talent there, and the receiver. They had Brian Robinson to that running back. Sorry, you had Brian Robinson to that running back room that's already got McKissick and Antonio Gibson. Logan Thomas, obviously at tight end. They had the Nevada kid Cole Turner as well. I think there's talent there, and there's talent for somebody like a Howell to utilize.
I think so too. I think they are almost look at themselves thinking, well, we're cool with the trade value we gave up for Wentz, which I don't agree with, but I know Rivera said that publicly, and I have no reason to doubt him because they never thought someone like Howell would be there in the fifth. If they'd been told that pre-draft, they'd be like, yeah, let's never do that trade, keep the second round pick and have Howell because we've had Mark Bullock on the show before who covers them in tons of detail. That they run one of the most creative run systems in the league by a mile. What they don't have off that is a ton of quite clever play action stuff that flows from the same run actions. It's quite obvious what they're running when they run the ball, but it's really diverse in terms of what they run. And Carson Wentz is not a good play action thrower because he takes too long to throw the ball. Whereas Sam Howell, I think, like you're saying, he didn't get a ton of chance to do it in North Carolina because of the system, but him as a quick trigger, turn the back, get the ball back out. I think that's where he would thrive. So marrying that run scheme with Howell would get me all sorts of excited when I walked into training camp. What was not going to get me excited is Carson Wentz taking 5-step drops and trying to throw the ball down the field.
I'm Scott Turner and Ken Zampese. That's all I'm looking at in terms of, okay, we've got this kid in the fifth round, an absolute bargain bucket. What can we do with him? How can we slightly tailor our offense to make it fit for him? Because he looks like Carson Wentz, to all intents and purposes, is not the future of the Washington Commanders. And I think Sam Howell probably is.
Just quickly on the other guys then. Willis, like you, I love that. The timeline is so perfect. You give him the year. And he is a guy where I believe you have to kind of change your roster and franchise to buy into that. Not quite to Lamar Jackson levels, but not too dissimilar if you want to maximize him. But it does give you the year to say, either as we turn the roster over towards that, which is a Treylon Burks in space and all that kind of stuff, right? Or, hang on, he can do all this boot action stuff that he was never asked to run. So no worries there. We can just keep running our same old offense. And here is Malik Willis. And then the Ridder one, like you mentioned, the great thing there is the comparison I used throughout the process was Mariota. There's Marcus Mariota. The crossover from one to the other, from 1 week to the next, whoever's got the hot hand, whenever you think, oh, it's week 7, you know what? Desmond seems ready in practice. They're not going to have to do this thing with Trey Lance where it's like, well, when Jimmy's in the game, we have this one offense. If he gets injured, we're going to go to the Trey Lance offense. We really want to go to the Trey Lance offense next year, but we're going to have to put the package together now in case we need him. They can just all get together on week 1 and be like, okay, doesn't really matter who's in the game. You look the same. You guys play the same. Off we go.
Yeah, 100%. Corral's another interesting one as well. Third round, a good value, goes into an interesting team, an interesting, obviously clearly not sold on Sam Darnold. And again, you look around, you think, okay, there is some talent, whether that's Donta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard and McCaffrey, obviously depending on his health. But you look at the receivers, Robbie Anderson and Terrace Marshall and DJ Moore, and they obviously brought in Charleston Rambo, and Shai Smith is still there. You hope he kicks on after a year. And Tommy Tremble, the kid from Notre Dame at tight end, who I really liked coming out. And there is some talent there. And they've obviously shored out the offensive line, obviously, with Ike Ekwonu and, the guys that are the holdovers from there. And I just think that there's interesting players there for somebody like Corral to succeed. Because, again, that's not Sam Darnold's team at all. And
that one terrifies me, though. That I was going to ask you about this because I looked at it and I was like, oh, man, they're going to make him play in like week 4 because the staff's going to be desperate. Donald's going to be terrible. And that guy, I way would have preferred him in Tennessee or Atlanta and at least having because I think he will need a full year. Whereas the other guys not.
Yeah, that's the flip side when you talk about Sam Howell and Carson Wentz. And you probably feel comfortable putting Howell in week 4. But Corral, I just don't think you. Yeah, and there's also, it's not just the physical on the field thing. I just think there's a mental maturity thing with Corral that we've been through in terms of, all the issues that you had in high school and all the issues you had in college, the Wayne Gretzky son thing. And I thought it was very interesting when David Tepper talked about how, they were they liked the kid, but they weren't sure, and they got him up on a Zoom and they had a long chat with him. And
Thanks, boss.
Tepper talked about, how, okay, I think this kid has learned from his mistakes, but it does make me nervous when people start talking about people who've had historical issues with off-field problems. All of a sudden, they've learned from their mistakes, because very few of them really do learn from their mistakes. So, listen, we'll wait and see. He's in a small market city in terms of Carolina, so I think it'll he's going to be out of the spotlight a little bit, but the pressure's going to come pretty quickly if Sam Darnold doesn't look great in the first few weeks.
I think so too, because he's just not a playbook guy. You hate to say that about some certain players, but every single report, I think Lane Kiffin has said it. He's like, yeah, that's not his bag. Well, it's like, well, he's going to have to be at the pro level, and he's going to have to be if he's playing in week 4 because Sam Darnold stinks. So that has written all over it. Desperation. We throw the young lad out. We hope he runs around and makes some plays, and we all save our jobs. And that's not a fair situation to put a raw player into.
I think Matt Rule will be the first head coach fired in 2023.
After Matt Corral's first week started.
It's like out of the frying pan into the other frying pan.
Yeah, it's strange that Penn State head coaching gig probably at the end of the year.